They say love can move mountains, but betrayal can break them into dust. In the quiet hush of dawn, a taxi pulls up to a sprawling mansion's iron gates. 3 small faces press against the window, clutching a crumpled envelope with bold red letters screaming DNA test results. Their mother, gaunt from sleepless nights, stands resolute at the door. Inside those walls, Thomas, once her devoted lover, is laughing with his newest mistress. He's already denied the children's existence once, but the truth can't remain hidden forever. This is a story of heartbreak, deception, and shocking revelations that will leave you breathless. Sarah Lancaster grew up amid the wide stretches of farmland in Berkshire, England. Her parents, Robert and Margaret Lancaster, taught her the values of hard work and honesty. She spent her youth attending a small local school, excelling in literature and drama. Her fiery imagination and empathic nature allowed her to see the human heart with remarkable clarity. Even in her modest hometown, she dreamed big. She wanted love that ignited her soul and a life that felt like a grand adventure. At 22, Sarah moved to London for university. She enrolled at King's College to study English literature, envisioning a future where she could write novels about sweeping romances. She quickly found part-time work as a waitress in an upscale restaurant near Knightsbridge. On weekends, she also helped out at a local children's home, reading stories to the kids and listening to their innocent hopes and dreams. That was where she first crossed paths with Thomas Westwood. Thomas was everything Sarah had read about in her classic novels: tall, refined, and charismatic. He came from an influential London family that owned a string of luxury boutique hotels across Europe. He volunteered at the children's home occasionally, though more for social appearances than genuine altruism. For Sarah, he was a romantic figure stepping right out of a storybook. She noticed how carefully he spoke, how intently he listened, and how effortlessly he commanded a room's attention. She felt drawn to him, as though they were star-crossed lovers set on a predestined collision course. One rainy Sunday afternoon, Sarah found herself caught in a downpour while leaving the children's home. Umbrella-less and soaked to the bone, she was frantically trying to shield her books under her coat. Thomas, spotting her predicament, pulled his car over. In that moment, seeing him step out into the rain to offer her a ride, Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. She couldn't forget how his hazel eyes lit up in the drizzling sky. Their conversation flowed easily as he drove her back to her small flat in Clapham. Thomas asked about her dreams and passions, about her writings, and about her childhood. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt that someone genuinely saw her, a sweet, intelligent woman with boundless ambition, and accepted her wholly. A second encounter occurred a few weeks later at the restaurant where Sarah worked. Thomas strolled in with a business associate and recognized her immediately. Throughout the evening, he watched her serve tables with graceful efficiency. Every so often, he would catch her eye, and they exchanged secret, knowing smiles. By the time she served dessert, he slipped a note onto the tray. "Dinner tomorrow, I'll bring the conversation. You bring the laughter." Thomas. Sarah's heart fluttered. She tried to calm her nerves, but there was no denying the thrill coursing through her veins. She had read and written about whirlwind romances, but never believed she'd be part of one. Their first official date took place at a Michelin-starred restaurant in Mayfair. Sarah felt out of place at first, worried about how to hold the fancy silverware, or how to interpret the elaborate menu. But Thomas had a way of disarming her anxiety with a reassuring smile. He told stories about visiting the family hotels in Paris and Milan, about playing polo in Windsor, and about how he wanted to use his influence to better the world somehow. The more he spoke, the more Sarah's admiration grew. After dinner, they strolled along the quiet streets near Hyde Park. He walked her home, lingering at her door, and brushed a gentle kiss across her lips. From that night forward, Sarah was convinced Thomas was the one. Despite their different backgrounds, she believed in a future where their love would be enough. Little did she know that Thomas lived behind layers of secrets, and that these secrets would soon unravel, leaving her entire world in shambles. In the early days of their courtship, Thomas showered Sarah with extravagant gestures. He would appear at her small Clapham flat with bouquets of white orchids, or invite her to high society events where she'd mingle with London's elite. Sarah was taken aback by the sheer opulence of Thomas's life, the black tie galas at the Dorchester champagne receptions at art galleries in Soho, and exclusive invitations to fashion shows in Paris. For a moment she worried that she might never fit into his world, but Thomas insisted that she was perfect in every way. His family, particularly his mother Beatrice Westwood, initially welcomed Sarah with a polite but guarded smile. The Westwoods were known for their philanthropic events around London and had a carefully curated public image. Beatrice had hoped her only son would settle down with a woman of similar social standing, perhaps from another influential family. Yet seeing Thomas's excitement around Sarah, she remained cordial, albeit distant. For Sarah, all these new experiences felt both thrilling and unnerving. She was introduced to the glittering circles of aristocrats, financiers, and celebrities. Her social media began to fill with photos of her wearing designer gowns and sipping cocktails in front of grand ballrooms. College friends teased her for having leveled up, but Sarah still tried to remain rooted. She continued her part-time job at the restaurant and attended classes diligently. Deep down, a small voice nagged at her. "Is all this real? Can I sustain a life with Thomas without losing myself?" Despite the occasional self-doubt, Sarah's love for Thomas grew. Each day he revealed a side of himself that was gentle, attentive, and charming. He once surprised her with a weekend trip to Bath just so they could browse antique bookshops together. Another time he showed up at her flat unannounced with a cat he had adopted in her name, a ragdoll named Duchess, because he said Sarah deserved a noble companion. The grand gestures never ended, and Sarah fell deeper under Thomas's spell. But behind the scenes, Thomas had begun an elaborate web of half-truths. He withheld key details about his personal life, especially about the woman named Emily St. James, a business partner rumored to be far more to him than just a colleague. He also kept Sarah away from certain events, claiming she wouldn't enjoy them. When she asked pointed questions, he'd change the subject with an endearing smile and a quick kiss on her forehead. The first real red flag occurred when Sarah came across a framed photo at Thomas's family estate in Berkshire. She was exploring the lavish property alone, admiring century-old paintings and ornate furniture, when she noticed a photograph of Thomas with a stunning brunette. They stood side by side in front of a hotel in Rome, arms around each other beaming. An inscription at the bottom read, "Rome Opening, Thomas and Emily, 2018. The date was only a year prior. Sarah felt a pang of jealousy and confusion. She had known Thomas volunteered with Emily at the children's home, but that was only a fleeting mention. Who was Emily truly? Sarah recalled overhearing staff mention Emily's name in hushed tones, praising her poise and brilliance. But she had never imagined any deeper connection between them. Still, she brushed it off for the time being, choosing trust over suspicion. Thomas had asked her to meet him in the rose garden. There he knelt on one knee, not for a proposal, but to present her with a ring of antique origin. He slipped it on her finger with a simple vow. "I care for you deeply, Sarah. This ring belonged to my grandmother. Keep it close as a promise that someday we'll start our own story." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, and all thoughts of Emily vanished in that moment. She believed she was on the brink of the life she'd always dreamed of, a fairy tale romance that defied social boundaries. Little did she know the illusions of perfection were about to crumble, setting the stage for heartbreak she never saw coming. As Sarah's final year at King's College approached, she juggled coursework, her part-time job, and the demands of Thomas's high society world. Her parents visited from Berkshire, delighted to see their daughter thriving. Over tea at a Kensington cafe, they asked about Thomas, praising how happy Sarah looked. She blushed and simply said, "He's incredible," ignoring the tug of uncertainty at the back of her mind. One day, Sarah received a mysterious message on social media from someone named Lydia. It read, "Be careful with Thomas Westwood. You're not the only one." Attached was a photo of Thomas leaving a charity gala, his arm linked intimately with the same brunette from the photo Sarah had seen at his estate, Emily St. James. The image was recent, taken only a week before. Panic struck Sarah's heart. She rationalized that Thomas and Emily might still be working together on philanthropic projects, yet the tone of the message unsettled her. When she confronted Thomas that evening, he shrugged it off, claiming Emily was merely a close family friend and business partner. "She's been there since we were kids," he said, "and the media always loves spinning stories for gossip." He placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's cheek, looking into her eyes with a sincerity that made her doubt her own suspicions. "Trust me," he whispered. "You're the only one that matters." In a whirlwind of emotion, Sarah let it go. She had exams looming and a life to manage. Thomas, for his part, made grand gestures to quell her fears, a surprise birthday party at the Savoy, where he invited her closest friends from university, a weekend retreat to the Cotswolds, a diamond bracelet that must have cost a small fortune. With every doubt that arose, Thomas fought back with extravagant proof of his unwavering devotion. During the summer after Sarah graduated, she decided to take a job at a publishing house in London, eager to put her English degree to use. Thomas supported her fully, at least outwardly. He insisted she move into his luxury penthouse in Belgravia to be closer to the new office. Sarah hesitated, but the allure of living with the man she loved was too strong to resist. But moving in brought its own revelations. Sarah found an old shoebox in the back of Thomas's walk-in closet. It was filled with letters, photos, and mementos, all concerning Emily. They'd traveled to multiple countries from Tokyo to Sydney, judging by the postcards. Some letters ended with "yours always or forever," signed by Emily. One photograph showed the two of them in an intimate embrace. Trembling with rage and heartbreak, Sarah confronted Thomas again. This time his composure cracked. He admitted to having an on-again, off-again relationship with Emily, but claimed it was over long before he met Sarah. "She can't let go," he insisted. "I promise you there's nothing left between us. She's just a friend I can't completely cut out because of family and business ties." Sarah let out a shaky breath. Her instincts told her something was deeply wrong, yet she chose to believe him. Love, when mixed with insecurity, can be dangerously blinding. She promised herself she'd keep her guard up, but her feelings for Thomas still held her captive. Weeks turned into months, and life found a semblance of normalcy. Sarah excelled at her new job, and Thomas continued to wine and dine her across the city. Yet she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was missing something crucial about the relationship. Whenever she broached the subject of their future of marriage and children, Thomas dodged, joking, "We're having too much fun now. Let's enjoy this moment." And then everything changed in one cataclysmic night. While attending a lavish charity ball at Claridge's, an event hosted by the Westwoods, Sarah noticed Emily standing by the bar. She wore a striking red gown, her gaze fixed on Sarah with a quiet challenge. Noticing Sarah's unease, Thomas grew visibly tense. He quickly escorted Sarah to a secluded corner and said, "I need to handle something. Please wait here." Sarah watched him approach Emily. Their exchange looked heated, with Emily gesturing wildly and Thomas trying to calm her. Finally, Emily stormed out of the ballroom and Thomas returned to Sarah, his face pale. He wouldn't speak a word of what happened. But later that night, when Sarah checked her phone, she found a text from an unknown number. "Ask Thomas about the ring he promised me." Sarah felt her world tilt on its axis. She confronted Thomas in their penthouse, tears streaming down her face, brandishing her phone. He stuttered, unable to form a coherent answer. They argued into the early hours of the morning, voices echoing off the penthouse walls, until Sarah, devastated, finally packed a small bag and left. She retreated to a friend's flat, her heart in shambles, and resolved to break away from him for good. Little did she know her life was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would shatter her heart even more, but ultimately bring her a trio of blessings she never anticipated. Heartbroken and emotionally exhausted, Sarah tried to return to a semblance of normalcy after leaving Thomas. She stayed with her college friend Harriet, who had a cozy studio in Camden. She threw herself into her work at the publishing house, spending extra hours editing manuscripts and drafting marketing copy. Anything to keep her mind off Thomas and Emily. But the universe had other plans. A few weeks after the explosive fight at Claridge's, Sarah felt an unshakable fatigue. She found herself zoning out at meetings, yawning at her desk, and losing her appetite for the first time in her life. Harriet joked that Sarah was working too hard, but the notion of pregnancy briefly flickered in Sarah's mind. She pushed it aside. She was on birth control, and besides, the stress of the breakup likely accounted for her condition. Still, Harriet insisted they pick up a test from the pharmacy. Sarah laughed it off, telling Harriet it was unnecessary. But Harriet's concern wore her down, and eventually they found themselves standing in Harriet's bathroom staring at 3 pregnancy test sticks lined up on the sink. 2 pink lines. 3 times over. Sarah's hands trembled. The air seemed sucked out of the room. This wasn't just a fleeting problem to be brushed aside. If these tests were correct, she was pregnant with Thomas's child, or so she thought. A blur of emotions crashed into her all at once: disbelief, terror, excitement, and heartbreak. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, tears streaming down her face as Harriet knelt beside her, offering words of comfort. That evening, Sarah stared at the glow of the city lights from Harriet's small window. Her phone buzzed with notifications from colleagues and friends. One message stood out: a formal invitation from Thomas's family for another high-profile charity event, an event she had no intention of attending. She switched off her phone, pulled her knees to her chest, and sobbed quietly. The next day, she scheduled an appointment with a private OB/GYN at Mount Sinai Hospital in central London, seeking a professional test to confirm the pregnancy. Dr. Melissa Green, a compassionate woman with kind eyes, welcomed Sarah into her office. After several tests, Dr. Green returned with a gentle smile. "Sarah," she said softly, "you're pregnant, and according to your hormone levels and the ultrasound, there's more. You're carrying triplets." Sarah blinked, struggling to grasp the magnitude of the situation. Triplets. She felt a lump forming in her throat, and her hands instinctively cradled her still flat stomach. A swirl of conflicting thoughts took hold: fear of the challenges ahead, love for these tiny lives growing inside her, and anger toward Thomas. Anger that he had lied and manipulated her, and now she had to face this alone. Dr. Green explained the complexities of a multiple pregnancy. She outlined the potential complications, the need for regular checkups, and the importance of reducing stress. Sarah nodded numbly, her mind already racing. How would she afford this? Where would she live? Should she tell Thomas? 2 weeks passed, during which Sarah weighed her options. Harriet, ever the supportive friend, scoured listings for bigger flats. Sarah's parents, upon learning the news, urged her to return to Berkshire, where they could help care for her. Sarah contemplated going back home, but hesitated, determined to hold on to her London job and her independence. She resolved to tell Thomas only after she felt strong enough to face him again, or never if that seemed best. But fate forced her hand. One evening, Thomas arrived at her publishing house unannounced, waiting in the lobby. She spotted him out of the corner of her eye, impeccably dressed and exuding his usual charm. Although her first instinct was to turn away, she couldn't bring herself to slip out unnoticed. Summoning her courage, she approached him. He apologized profusely for the fight, for the confusion surrounding Emily, for everything. He claimed his family business ties and long history with Emily led to misunderstandings. "I've ended all ties with her, Sarah," he insisted, his voice trembling. "I only want you. I've been a fool not to see how my actions affected you." Sarah wavered, tears pooling in her eyes. She thought of the triplets. She didn't trust Thomas completely, but the news of 3 babies felt too significant to keep hidden forever. After a moment of tense silence, she finally said, "I'm pregnant. And it's triplets." Thomas's eyes widened. He stood there in stunned silence for several long seconds, passers-by glancing curiously. Eventually, he reached for her hand. "Sarah, this is huge. We'll figure it out. Let's get dinner and talk." Against her better judgment, Sarah agreed. Over a tense meal at a quiet bistro, Thomas's initial shock turned to cautious optimism. He didn't deny his responsibility. He vowed to support her in every way. He even mentioned introducing Sarah to a private obstetrician from his family circle. In that moment, Sarah thought perhaps a glimmer of hope still remained for their relationship. Maybe the babies would force him to step up and leave his double life behind. Yet a nagging voice inside her warned not to be too quick to forgive. She reminded Thomas that trust wouldn't come easily. He nodded, looking remorseful, promising to do whatever it took to prove himself. With a heavy heart, Sarah decided to let him be part of her journey, but she kept her emotional walls up. She had to protect herself and her unborn children. Neither of them realized that the real storm was yet to come. The illusions, the lies, and the manipulations were about to collide in a scene so dramatic that Sarah would be left questioning the man she once thought she loved and the family she thought she'd build with him. Sarah's pregnancy progressed quickly, her belly beginning to show faster than most single baby pregnancies. She took Thomas to a few doctor's appointments at Mount Sinai Hospital. Initially, he was attentive, asking Dr. Green about prenatal vitamins, proper diet, and what Sarah needed to stay healthy. He seemed intent on being the devoted partner and father-to-be. For a fleeting moment, Sarah dared to hope this new responsibility might finally shift his priorities. But as the weeks wore on, Thomas became busier and more elusive. He claimed he was finalizing an important hotel deal that demanded constant travel. Days passed without a single text from him. When he did appear, it was at odd hours, showering Sarah with lavish gifts, a designer maternity wardrobe, a diamond pendant to celebrate motherhood. Yet these tokens felt hollow without genuine emotional support. One night, Sarah noticed a new credit card statement addressed to Thomas lying on the coffee table. He had left it behind in a rush. She glanced at the transactions, purchases at luxury boutiques in Paris, a staggering bill from a spa in the south of France, and a hotel booking for two. Sarah's heart twisted. She picked up her phone and confronted him via text. Sarah, did you go to France recently because your statement shows you paid for two people? Thomas. It's just business, Sarah. Calm down. Those words, calm down, were enough to make her blood boil. She slammed the phone onto the sofa, tears burning in her eyes. Was history repeating itself? All the old insecurities about Emily flared back to life. But Sarah tried to remain calm, telling herself she needed solid proof before jumping to conclusions. She was tired, physically, emotionally, mentally. The triplets were sapping her energy, leaving her more vulnerable than ever. The tipping point came when Sarah received a phone call from Harriet, who had stumbled across an Instagram post by Emily St. James. It was a photo of Emily sipping champagne on the balcony of a French Riviera resort with a caption, "Business or pleasure?" Why not both? Harriet recognized the resort's architecture from the credit card statement. The timestamp matched Thomas's alleged business trip. Sarah felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. She was determined to get answers. She texted Thomas that she was feeling particularly ill and needed him home immediately. When he arrived, she confronted him with Emily's Instagram post and the credit card statement. At first, he spun an elaborate yarn about meeting an investor who happened to be a mutual contact of Emily's. But under Sarah's relentless questioning, he finally cracked, "Yes, Emily was there. I had to finalize some business with her. It was just a few days." "It's not what you think." Sarah felt fury churn in her stomach. "Not what I think." "Thomas, I'm carrying your babies, and this is how you treat me." She clutched her growing belly, her voice trembling between anger and heartbreak. Thomas tried to sidestep the conversation, but Sarah wouldn't let him. The tension escalated, culminating in an explosive fight. Finally, in a moment of raw frustration, Thomas said, "Look, Emily and I have a history. It's not easy to just erase that. But you need to understand your place." Sarah's face paled. "My place?" She echoed, disbelief ringing in her voice. Thomas opened his mouth to speak again, but the words seemed to die in his throat. Before he could explain, Sarah turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was done. She packed a small bag and left, uncertain if she'd ever return. Over the next few days, she battled her inner turmoil. She had 3 lives growing inside her, and a man who seemed incapable of true loyalty. What was she to do? She consulted a solicitor to understand her legal rights, but her heart felt heavier by the day. Her parents urged her to return to Berkshire, promising to help however they could. Meanwhile, Harriet advised her to cut ties with Thomas altogether, let him handle child support, and move on. Deep down, Sarah knew she had to protect herself and the babies from this betrayal. But then came the final blow. A week later, there was another charity gala, this time at the prestigious Spencer Hall. Sarah, determined to close this chapter on her own terms, decided to attend, if only to let Thomas know face to face that she wanted nothing to do with his lies anymore. She arrived in a flowing emerald maternity gown, her belly unmistakable. The room buzzed with curiosity as she made her entrance. Whispers followed her eyes fixated on her round figure. Thomas spotted her from across the room and looked panicked. Before Sarah could approach him, Emily St. James, radiant in a shimmering silver dress, slipped an arm around Thomas's waist. As cameras flashed, Thomas didn't move away. Instead, he wore a forced smile as if he were performing for the crowd. Emily leaned in, whispering something in his ear, then turned her icy gaze on Sarah. The tension was palpable. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah's heart pounded, her stomach churning. She locked eyes with Thomas. There before everyone, he averted his gaze, ignoring her like she didn't exist. Emily looked smug, and Sarah felt a sharp stabbing pain of heartbreak. She heard him mutter something to a colleague about an unfortunate misunderstanding. Right then, Sarah realized that Thomas had effectively chosen Emily in public, no less. She fought back tears and left the gala, ignoring the stares and whispered judgments. Her phone buzzed with messages from Harriet, from her parents, all concerned about her well-being. She hailed a taxi and sank into the seat, cradling her belly protectively. In that moment, she resolved that Thomas Westwood was no longer worthy of her love or trust. If he wanted to deny her, let him. She would raise these babies with or without him. Little did she know, fate had other dramatic plans. Plans that would bring her triplets to his doorstep with indisputable evidence of his paternity. The final trimester of Sarah's pregnancy was fraught with anxiety and upheaval. She had moved back to her friend Harriet's flat, focusing solely on preparing for the triplets. Her belly swelled considerably, making even simple tasks like climbing stairs feel like mountain treks. Still, her determination shone through. She attended regular checkups with Dr. Green, who kept close tabs on the baby's health. Sarah's parents frequently visited from Berkshire, bringing homemade meals and moral support. Despite her heartbreak, Sarah felt a strange sense of serenity whenever she thought about the triplets. She imagined 3 tiny faces looking up at her, each with their own distinct personality. She took out a small notebook and wrote down potential names, doodling hearts and stars around them. Even if their father was absent, these children would know love from their mother-grandparents and Harriet, the small but steadfast circle that truly cared. One chilly evening in late December, Sarah was wrapping up her last day at the publishing house before taking maternity leave. As she rode the tube home, her lower back seized with an intense ache. She dismissed it as the usual discomfort, but the pain intensified. By the time she reached Harriet's flat, she was struggling to walk. Harriet rushed her to Mount Sinai Hospital, where Dr. Green examined her. It appeared the triplets were coming early, nearly 4 weeks ahead of schedule. Sarah's world blurred into a flurry of medical procedures, bright hospital lights, and encouraging voices. Her parents arrived as she was wheeled into the delivery room. Harriet held her hand, whispering reassurances. After hours of labor, Sarah finally delivered 3 tiny miracles, 2 boys and 1 girl. She named them Oliver, Ollie, Matthew, and Lily, names she'd dreamed of for months. Despite their premature birth, each baby was relatively healthy, though they required observation in the neonatal unit. Thomas was nowhere to be found, and Sarah didn't call him. She was too exhausted physically and emotionally. Over the next few days, she focused on her newborns in the NICU. She watched them sleep in their incubators, moved to tears by the sight of their delicate fingers and tiny whimpers. In those raw, vulnerable moments, she pledged to do whatever it took to give them a good life. Word of the triplets' birth traveled quickly through mutual acquaintances. While Sarah was alone in her hospital room one morning, Harriet poked her head in. "You won't believe who's here," she whispered, her expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Thomas is outside demanding to see you and the babies." Sarah's initial reaction was panic. She didn't want him near them, not after he denied her so publicly. But Harriet pointed out that Thomas had a legal right to see his children. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed to a brief visit. Thomas entered the room looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His usual confident air was replaced by a nervous tension. He stared at the tiny figures in the incubators, tears welling in his eyes. They're mine," he whispered. "How are they? Are they healthy?" Sarah's voice shook as she recounted the complicated birth and the baby's premature condition. Thomas listened intently, his gaze darting from Sarah to the infants. After a long silence, he spoke softly. "I'm sorry for everything. I want to be in their lives." Sarah, however, was done with empty promises. "If you want to do something for them, then do it. But don't expect me to open my heart to you again. You broke it too many times." Thomas nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. Over the following week, he returned daily, bringing gifts for the baby's stuffed animals, soft blankets, even a set of monogrammed onesies. Sarah appreciated the gesture for the baby's sake, but kept her distance emotionally. The memories of his betrayal still stung like an open wound. One morning, Sarah woke to find an elegant envelope slipped beneath her hospital door. Inside was a legal document acknowledging Thomas's paternity, along with a promise to set up a trust fund for the triplets. Sarah's eyes skimmed the text, her emotions in turmoil. She wanted financial security for her children, but she questioned whether Thomas's motivations were genuine or driven by his family's concern for public image. Only time would tell. For now, Sarah focused on getting her babies healthy enough to bring home. When Oliver and Lily were cleared first, Matthew needed an extra few days in the NICU. Thomas visited, but Emily's conspicuous absence and her radio silence on social media gnawed at Sarah's curiosity. Where was she now? While finalizing the discharge papers, Dr. Green suggested a DNA paternity test to alleviate any potential legal complications. Sarah agreed, primarily to protect herself and the babies. Thomas complied without protest, seemingly eager to prove his paternal claim. And so Sarah left Mount Sinai Hospital, cradling two of her triplets, with the third soon to follow. As she slid into the back seat of her parents' car, she felt a mix of relief and apprehension. She could almost sense that the story wasn't finished yet. She had no idea how soon the next wave of drama would unfold once those DNA test results came in. 2 months passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings. Sarah's life revolved around the triplets, preparing bottles, changing diapers, soothing fussy babies. She moved back to her parents' home in Berkshire temporarily for extra help. Harriet visited often, bringing groceries and moral support while also forwarding any letters or messages that arrived at the London flat. Thomas texted sporadically, asking about the baby's health. He insisted he wanted to be involved, but his actions often fell short. He'd arrange a visit and then cancel last minute, citing urgent business. Soon, Sarah's resentment built up again. She considered ignoring him altogether, but her parents reminded her that the children deserved the chance to know their father. Then came the day the official DNA results arrived. Sarah heard a knock at the door and opened it to find a courier holding a sealed envelope. She recognized the letterhead from the private genetics lab. Her heart pounded as she tore open the envelope. The test confirmed Thomas Westwood as the father of Oliver, Matthew, and Lily. No doubt remained. Sarah sighed in relief, though she couldn't help feeling a pang of sadness that this was even necessary. Would Thomas step up now that the truth was indisputable? A few days later, Harriet called, excitement ringing in her voice. "Sarah, you won't believe it!" A friend of mine who works in event planning said Thomas is hosting a fundraiser at the Westwood estate tomorrow. Emily will be there. They're unveiling a new children's charity initiative. Sarah's blood ran cold. She'd all but banished thoughts of Emily, focusing solely on her babies. Harriet continued. "We should go. Show him that you have the results. Give him no choice but to acknowledge the triplets publicly." It was a bold plan, but after everything Thomas had put her through, Sarah found a strange surge of courage. Perhaps it was the fierce maternal instinct that demanded justice for her kids. She and Harriet arranged childcare with Sarah's mother, packed the official DNA letter, and prepared to crash the fundraiser. The next evening, they drove to the Westwood estate, an opulent manor with sprawling gardens and a gated entrance. The fundraiser thrummed with lively music and chattering guests dressed in designer finery. Sarah felt a wave of nerves, but Harriet steadied her with a supportive nod. They managed to slip past the registration table, blending in with the crowd. Across the lawn, Sarah saw Thomas talking animatedly with wealthy donors. Emily hovered close, occasionally resting a hand on his arm. The sight made Sarah's stomach turn. She approached them with Harriet at her side, the letter clutched in her trembling hand. Before Thomas could greet them, Emily's glossy lips curled into a mocking smile. "Sarah," she purred, "it's been a while. I hear you had babies." The condescension in her voice lit a spark of fury in Sarah's chest. She straightened her posture and turned to Thomas. "We need to talk." The hush that fell around them drew the attention of nearby guests. Thomas stiffened, glancing nervously at Emily, then back at Sarah. "Not now," he hissed, forcing a smile for the onlookers. "Let's go somewhere private." Sarah shook her head. "No here and now. You owe me and our children a public acknowledgement." Emily's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched in amusement. "Thomas, you said this was all a misunderstanding," she cooed loud enough for the guests to hear. "You're sure these babies are even yours?" The insinuation was a dagger to Sarah's heart. She struggled to maintain composure, but Harriet jumped in. "Shut it, Emily. We have the DNA results right here." She brandished the letter, waving it for all to see. Thomas paled, looking from Emily to Sarah as onlookers gathered in a semicircle. "We don't need to create a scene," he pleaded, but it was too late. Sarah read aloud from the document how it unequivocally confirmed Thomas as the father. She concluded, voice shaking, "There's no more denying these children, Thomas. I will not let you walk away from them." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Cameras flashed as a few journalists in attendance snapped pictures. Thomas tried to speak, but Emily cut him off with a triumphant smirk. "If you want to believe her little piece of paper, then so be it." "But you told me she trapped you." Sarah's eyes widened. She glared at Thomas, her anger building. "You told her I trapped you." She laughed bitterly. "And here I was thinking you couldn't stoop any lower." Thomas attempted damage control, raising his hands. "Sarah, that's not." But he froze under the weight of so many witnessing eyes. Finally, he turned to Emily, who glared daggers at him. Without warning, Emily spun on her heel and stalked off, shouting, "Don't bother calling me again." "Thomas." For a moment, Thomas stood alone, thoroughly humiliated. Sarah could almost feel pity for him. Almost. Then she remembered all the heartache the nights spent crying the burden of raising 3 babies alone while he partied with his mistress. Eyes stinging with tears, Sarah lifted her chin. "Don't you ever humiliate me again. These children deserve better." She turned and walked away, Harriet at her side, the hush of the crowd parting like waves. Behind them, Thomas stood there, powerless to stop the collapse of his carefully crafted image. Little did they all know that this public showdown was merely the beginning of a new chapter, one that would force Thomas to confront the reality of fatherhood in the most profound way possible. Weeks after the explosive confrontation at the Westwood estate, Sarah found a fragile peace at her parents' home. She spent her days bonding with Ollie, Matthew, and Lily. Family friends donated baby supplies while Harriet made frequent trips down from London to lend a hand. Every now and then, Sarah's mother would raise the subject of Thomas and whether he'd been in contact, but Sarah refused to dwell on it. She was determined to move forward without him, relying on the DNA letter only for legal protections if needed. But something tugged at her heart. As much as she resented Thomas, she couldn't deny the triplets their father if he chose to be involved properly. One chilly afternoon, she decided to text him. "The children are doing well. Let me know if you want to be part of their lives in a real way." She stared at the screen, heart pounding before hitting send. Hours passed, then days. No response. Then late one night, Harriet called, breathless with the latest gossip. "Thomas has gone off the radar," she said. Word is Emily's left him and his family is furious about the scandal. He's been kicked out of the board of Westwood hotels for the time being. Sarah's heart sank. She never wanted him to lose everything, she just wanted the truth. She placed her phone on silent and tried to focus on the babies. The next day she braced herself for more of the same, a routine of feedings, diaper changes, lullabies, when a sudden thought seized her. Despite everything, Thomas might benefit from meeting the triplets in a less hostile environment. Her mother offered to watch the babies if Sarah needed to confront him alone, but Sarah felt the opposite was necessary. If Thomas wanted to see his children, he should see them as they truly were, a lively, demanding trio that he couldn't ignore. With Harriet's help, she decided on a bold move: bring the triplets to Thomas's Belgravia penthouse. He can't deny them if they show up at his doorstep, Harriet reasoned. Sarah was unsure, but Harriet's idea ignited a flicker of justice in her. He denied you in front of Emily, but he won't be able to deny 3 crying infants in front of his staff, Harriet quipped, half joking. So one drizzly morning, Sarah bundled up the babies, strapped them into their car seats, and set off for London. The drive felt surreal. She hadn't been to Belgravia since before giving birth. She recalled happier memories that first night Thomas invited her over the surprise breakfast, dancing in the penthouse living room to old jazz records. She gripped the steering wheel, telling herself this wasn't about rekindling romance. It was about closure. They arrived at the sleek modern building where Thomas lived. The doorman, recognizing Sarah, hesitated before letting them in. One of the babies started crying, echoing in the posh marble lobby, attracting curious stares. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped into the elevator. The elevator doors slid open to reveal the penthouse foyer. Harriet rang the bell repeatedly, but no answer came. Was Thomas even home? After a few tense minutes, the door cracked open, revealing a tired, unshaven Thomas in a bathrobe. He stared at Sarah, Harriet, and the stroller carrying 3 wailing infants. His eyes widened in disbelief. "What?" he mumbled, stepping back to let them in. Once inside, the place was a mess. Half-packed boxes, empty takeout containers, unwashed dishes. Gone were the pristine surfaces and fresh flowers that once adorned every table. Thomas looked more like a defeated man than the self-assured socialite Sarah had known. Sarah unstrapped Ollie, handing him over. Thomas gingerly took his son, cradling him awkwardly. Harriet retrieved Lily, who began fussing, and thrust her into Thomas's other arm. Bewildered, he tried to juggle 2 squirming babies at once. Matthew remained in the stroller, wiggling and hiccuping. Thomas swallowed, glancing at Sarah. I didn't expect this," he admitted. "I've been a wreck." Sarah's voice came out steady, surprising even her. "They're your children, Thomas. The DNA results are final. If you really want to be part of their lives, then prove it." For the next hour, Harriet helped feed and change the babies while Thomas watched, still in a daze. Slowly, he found his composure. He asked about each baby's health, their feeding schedule, how they slept. Sarah answered succinctly, letting him see the reality of fatherhood, the cries, the spit-ups, the constant need for affection and care. After Harriet stepped into the corridor to make a phone call, Thomas finally turned to Sarah, voice heavy with regret. "I never wanted to abandon you or them. My life spun out of control. The business, Emily, my family's expectations. I didn't know how to handle it all." Sarah gave a bitter laugh. "That's no excuse. I had to face raising them alone." Thomas's eyes welled up. He gently rocked Lily, who dozed off in his arms. "I want to do better," he said softly. "I need time, but I promise I'll fix this." Sarah exhaled. "We'll see," was all she could manage. She packed up the baby's things, preparing to leave. Thomas placed a trembling kiss on each infant's forehead, swallowing hard as he handed them back to Sarah. "Thank you for letting me see them." As Sarah wheeled the stroller back toward the elevator, Thomas called after her. "Wait, can I see them again soon?" She paused. "You know where to find us. But don't make false promises. They deserve consistency." The elevator doors closed, and Sarah felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had given Thomas a chance to face his children. No more illusions, no more denials. Whether he would rise to the occasion or sink further into his own mess remained to be seen. Back at the car, Harriet squeezed Sarah's shoulder. "That was intense, but you did great." Sarah nodded, glancing at her sleeping children. "They're worth it." Indeed, the triplets had made their grand appearance at Thomas's gate, DNA letter in tow, forcing him to confront the truth. Whatever would come next, Sarah knew she and her babies were no longer living in anyone's shadow of denial. Over the next few months, Thomas made tentative strides to show he could be a reliable father. He arranged scheduled visits always supervised by Sarah or her parents. At first, it felt cumbersome, like dealing with a polite stranger rather than a caring co-parent. But Sarah was firm. If Thomas wanted to be part of the triplets' lives, he had to learn their routines and respect her boundaries. The tabloids had a field day with the scandal. Headlines like "Heir to Westwood Hotels, Secret Triplets Exposed" popped up online, accompanied by grainy photos of Thomas looking harried and Sarah pushing a stroller. Emily St. James, meanwhile, seemed to vanish from public view. Rumor had it she'd moved to New York to start fresh, leaving Thomas to face the aftermath alone. Despite the gossip, Sarah focused on her own life. She worked remotely for the publishing house, handling editorial tasks during the baby's nap times. Her parents helped with childcare, giving Sarah the occasional break to catch her breath. Slowly but surely, she found a new rhythm, a routine that revolved around Ollie, Matthew, and Lily. Love for them filled the void left by Thomas's betrayal. One crisp spring afternoon, Thomas surprised Sarah by showing up at her parents' doorstep in Berkshire with a trunk full of baby supplies, cribs, car seats, even a double stroller. Sarah watched from the kitchen window as he lugged them to the porch. He looked more stable, clean-shaven, purposeful, yet still carrying a certain sadness. They set up the new cribs together in the spare room, working side by side in awkward silence. Finally, Thomas cleared his throat. "I've been meeting with a counselor," he admitted, "trying to figure out why I've messed up so badly." Sarah paused, leaning on the edge of the crib. "Good," she managed. "That's good." Thomas nodded. "I want you to know I'm serious about being a father to them, if you'll let me." Emotions swirled inside Sarah. She remembered the fiery love she'd once felt, the heartbreak that followed, but she also saw the father trying to put things right, at least for the baby's sake. "The children come first," she finally said. "If you're committed, I won't stand in your way." In the weeks that followed, Thomas's actions matched his words. He spent time feeding the triplets, changing their diapers, and even taking them on strolls around the block. He began transferring monthly child support to Sarah's account without fail. Sarah, initially skeptical, noticed he was no longer making excuses or ducking responsibilities. Even Harriet begrudgingly admitted he might actually be learning from his mistakes. As for Emily, the final word came from a mutual friend who claimed she'd set up shop in Manhattan, rumored to be dating a financier. Whatever her motivations had been, she was out of Thomas's life now, and by extension Sarah's. The resentment Sarah felt toward Emily ebbed, replaced by relief that she was no longer a looming threat. Eventually, Sarah's parents gently suggested that it might be time for her to find her own place again. The triplets were growing fast, needing more space and a stable environment. Thomas offered financial help to secure a roomy flat in London close to parks and good schools. Sarah hesitated, not wanting to depend on him. But after carefully considering the children's best interests, she accepted on the condition that her name be on the lease and that she maintain full control over their living arrangements. In a surprising gesture, Thomas helped her move in. He spent an entire weekend assembling cribs and bookshelves. The new flat had large windows that bathed the rooms in sunlight and a small nursery perfect for 3 cribs side by side. The atmosphere felt hopeful, if still tinged with uncertainty about the future. One evening after the triplets were asleep, Sarah and Thomas found themselves on the sofa quietly sipping tea. Thomas cleared his throat. "I know I'll never erase the pain I caused you," he began, voice quiet. "I just want you to know I'm trying to become a better man. Not to get you back, but for our children. And maybe someday, if you can forgive me, to be a friend to you." A tear slid down Sarah's cheek. The old wounds throbbed, but she also sensed his sincerity. She had no desire to resurrect the romance they once shared. Too much had happened. But perhaps in time they could forge a new path, one based on mutual respect as co-parents. "I don't know about friendship," she admitted, "but let's keep focusing on the kids." Thomas nodded, looking both sad and grateful. They sat together in a contemplative silence, listening to the soft hum of the baby monitor. In that moment, Sarah realized she was no longer the naive girl who fell in love with a charming socialite. She had grown stronger, shaped by heartbreak and motherhood. She had 3 precious reasons to keep going, and she would never be denied or overshadowed again. And so life began anew, a complex mosaic of responsibilities, small victories, and cautious hope formed their days. The triplets thrived, babbling and giggling, forging their unique personalities. Sarah found joy in their milestones. First smiles, first attempts to crawl. She had survived betrayal and heartbreak, but she'd also discovered depths of love and resilience she never knew she possessed. The story wouldn't end with a neat fairy tale bow, but it moved forward with courage, honesty, and 3 little hearts whose beating reminded everyone that life, for all its twists and turns, could still hold immeasurable wonder. And so ends this chapter of a journey stained by heartbreak, yet lit by hope. Sarah's life is no longer defined by the man who once denied her. It now revolves around 3 tiny humans brimming with potential triplets, who forged their family's new path by simply coming into the world. In the aftermath of betrayal, Thomas grapples with his responsibilities, learning that fatherhood demands both vulnerability and sacrifice. Meanwhile, Sarah stands resolute, thriving in her own right, while granting him the chance to be present on her terms. If this story moved you or reminded you of the power of resilience and maternal love, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Together we can spread messages of courage, hope, and personal strength to those who need it most. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in our most unexpected challenges.